Some leaders carry influence without ever trying to stand in the spotlight. Tami Heim is one of those leaders. For years, she's been quietly gathering Christian nonprofit and ministry leaders into the same room, helping them lead with competence and deep spiritual formation. Not just better strategy, but better souls. In this conversation, I get to sit down with Tami and listen to her journey that has shaped her leadership, the disruptions that refined it, and why the future of ministry leadership may depend less on bigger platforms and more on leaders who are willing to seek God first together. This is the Life After Ministry podcast. Tami Heim, welcome to the Life After Ministry podcast.
Oh, Matt, it's so good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You are the president and CEO of the Christian Leadership Alliance. Give us a bit of what that is. For somebody who's never heard of, what is the Christian Leadership Alliance? It could be anything. What is it?
Well, Christian Leadership Alliance represents a community predominantly made up of nonprofit professionals, Christian nonprofit professionals. And when it began, there was a strong push towards building competencies to prevent the fail of a ministry. And there was a strong emphasis on accountability and really being the best, like setting a standard, like being better than maybe even the marketplace. And as time, it's evolved because there was this revelation about it's great to be a faithful steward and doing God's work and doing it well. But there's also something that happens when you're doing God's work well, but you're also doing it at the center of His will. So I would say in the past 5 years, we've seen a huge resurgence of where we are spending as much time caring for the soul of a leader and how to put on spiritual discipline practices so that they aren't so caught up in the leading and all of the business of the ministry, but they're also really seeking God's will for their ministry. And right now, our content and the things that we produce, we have digital resources and then we have live learning experiences. And today we're reaching 40 million people in 125 countries with the thought leadership. And it's not our thought leadership, it's how we aggregate and we curate the thought leadership of those that are members of the Alliance, and then find the channels of distribution, much like you're doing, Matt, with this podcast, so that that good, solid, Christ-centered thinking can be shared to many.
So really, it's this kind of crossroads of executive leadership, personal leadership. Do you find that over the years there's been one that has been more needed, or is that just every season of a leader's journey, it just depends on where they're at?
Well, I think in the very beginning, it was really a focus on management, okay, because we're celebrating our 50 years. So if you would dial back in time, it was maybe more of a management mindset, and then it shifted to management stewardship, and then really it's leadership, because I think over time we've seen a broadening of that definition to be one of influence. Whenever we're thinking or whenever we're influencing the thinking, the behavior, and the development of someone, we're actually leading them. And then you see Jesus coming to the mix with His model as a leader and how He led, and as Christians being able to emulate that, seek that, understand that, and put that on in our own lives. And certainly Jesus was doing both, but everything He did because the Father directed it. So He also gave us the example that we need to be in tune with the Father. We need to be in tune with God's will. And, He often said, nothing I do is unless the Father directs it and guides it. So how can we, in our journey to be more like Him, also make sure that we're dedicating our time to listen and be silent and have solitude with God?
Yeah, I remember I went through Talbot Theological Seminary, and I was there at the time when they introduced this spiritual formation part of our education process. So it wasn't just about theology, but it was also about formation and how do these come together. And so it's not just what you did, but who you are that matters, because we see that sometimes when you're very highly developed in one space and not developed at all in the other, that you crash and burn very quickly.
Yes.
And you come from the marketplace, right? So you have incredible experience in executive leadership, technology, marketing, publishing, retail.
Yes.
So I'm curious, like overseeing both of those different realms, for-profit space, the nonprofit space. You still have executive leadership, but it's not just because you're not a Christian or in the church that you don't have this personal formation side as well. But what's the biggest difference that you've seen in being in both worlds?
Again, I think I was unique in that I had a life where I always knew of God, but I never had a relationship with God until the day after I graduated from college. And I always say at the moment of that conversion, God saved me from my own ambition. So everything that I was doing up until that point in time was fulfilling the dreams I had for myself. And when I came to that moment of said, I don't want to live another day without Jesus Christ in control of my life, I forfeited that and actually called and canceled out on my dream. So where I was going to work and who I was going to, all that changed. And I actually just went into a deep time of discipleship, seeking God. But I always say it's interesting because all my life I had been studying and preparing for leadership and my vocation. And God was like, we're not going to waste that, but you're going to go in a different way, in a different posture. And with that change in my orientation, instead of going in and saying, what can I do to advance myself or to apply for the next, that kind of a strategy, was more like, Lord, give me a gospel conversation today. And it was interesting because after several years of being in the marketplace, I realized, there was a lot of favor and I was moving quickly. And then one day I had the revelation, I was traveling at the speed of those conversations, and that God kept expanding my scope and my position, as I was just faithfully trying to be in that moment. In fact, it got to a point, Matt, where people would say, well, we'd like to promote you here. We'd like to do something. I was like, but I love what I'm doing right now. And, but God put people in my life to see the things about me that I couldn't see about myself. But I was just content in what God brought each day. And he really opened all these doors.
So you were saying before I hit record, and you said, I was doing business as ministry before it was cool. And it's even the sticking point. Sometimes people will come on to this podcast and they'll say, life after ministry, like, isn't it all ministry? So you started with that mindset really from the beginning, and can attribute that mindset to God expanding and enlarging your responsibility.
Well, that was the point of my salvation. And I remember I went to my brother. I was actually unpacking from college and getting ready to pack to move away from home. And I just felt like the Spirit of God took me right out to my brother. And I asked the question. I said, I don't know what this means, but I don't want to live another life without Jesus Christ at the center of it. And that came after 45 days at Purdue University, where I used to go to Mass every day for all 4 years at 7:30. And I was sitting in the church and I had just gotten the big job offer. And I was so arrogant sitting in that church alone with God, like, look at me. And he went silent on me. And I felt compelled. I went to the Purdue University bookstore and I bought a Bible. And then for the remaining 45 days I was on campus, I feel like the Holy Spirit was just, okay, I'm going to bring you all the way home now. So I think that change in attitude, and then my brother saying, sis, following Jesus is thrill, romance, and adventure. This is going to be the best thing that ever happened. And I thought, well, that's a pretty exciting promise. And it has been. When I look back, I understand that so clearly. But there's a difference when you're taking a position and you're thinking, okay, how can I grow within a company, versus how can I be a blessing? How can I serve? How can what I do at work be my witness, and how I love and care for the people that I'm going to be directly responsible for? And how can I be in relationship with them? And of course, that those are careful lines. You have to be invited by someone to have that kind of a conversation. And it's just being in that position and loving and caring and being different. Like, Lord, just make me your fragrance each and every day. Mm-hmm. But I did see it as a mission field, just very different. And so I was really excited when you started to see that movement emerge and more people were in it. In fact, today, I sat on a catalyst team with Lausanne for workplace ministry because I still have a heart for that. I still believe wherever we are, that's God's call for our life.
What's the role of other people? Because this is not a solo sport, right? We have to, we are both forming and part of the formation process with other people, but those other people are forming us, even if we're leading them. And so what has that role of gospel community been for your own life? And how do you see that playing out with the people that CLA serve?
Well, that is the great exchange, right? Investing in one another. And that's the beauty of Christian Leadership Alliance. I always say that we are a reflection of 1 Corinthians 12, 4 through 7. Many different talents, many different gifts, many different activities, but the manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for the good of all. So I believe in our community, everybody shows up, they know they have something to give and they have something to receive. That to me is the most thrilling part of it, is when you see this amazing collaboration, when you see ministries working together and partnering and doing different things. But so that's a place of connection of people investing in you. But I always say, don't ever ask me who the one person is aside from Jesus, or don't ask me my favorite book, because it's a series of so many. And I've always been amazed when I reflect back on my life, how God brought wise guides into my life who had been running ahead of me. And then he brought me side guides that were on a similar journey with me, that we could wrestle and hold each other accountable on the way. And you see that. I live that and see that in Christian Leadership Alliance. I mean, if someone says, Tami, what's your job today? I always say, I get to create spaces and places where leaders can convene, can be strengthened, and bring their best to each other. And then we get to sit back and we watch the multiplication of that. And then my role is, how do I expand that great thinking to as many people as possible so they can be part of it?
It's a beautiful journey looking back, but there are always hard moments in the journey, right?
Always.
So what's one of the hardest seasons you went through as a leader, and how did you get through that season? What did you learn? What made it difficult? What helped you get out of it?
Well, I know that I could never say that when I was in a moment of a high ride and flourishing, like everything was going well, that I could step back and say, oh, here are all the things that I learned. Every lesson comes with the crucible, right, of leadership. And so early in my retail life, I was with Federated Department Stores. We went through 21 mergers and acquisitions, constant change. And then we went through the turmoil of people migrating away from malls into standalone marketing. So it was like the dynamics of everything was changing, which feels like slow motion compared to what we have today. So it was always adjusting. It was always trying to understand what's the new situation and learning quickly that you can't rage against the wave. You have a choice in every decision. And a lot of it is like, well, how do I embrace what it is? And instead of fighting it because it's new and it's foreign and it's scary, how do I just get into it and learn it as quickly as I can and be a contributing positive part of it? So the retail time was very much like that. And then I stepped out of that and I went into big book retail. And it just so happens I'm in the book industry in 2000, which is the .com boom. And I'm head on with Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And actually ended up inking a deal with them where they took over our online site. But it was trying to navigate those waters and the way everything was changing and progressing. And then at that time, leading in a time when, the country, now I look at today, not that we're at war today, 9/11. So I was running the Borders Change, and 9/11 went through the towers, and the largest, soon to be the most profitable Borders store was at the base of that. And the feeling of loss, but also knowing that because of the way that store was located, so many people's lives were saved because they got through that. But again, that was something that was very shocking and you needed to navigate. And then going into war. war stopped everything. And for Borders at the time, we had outstanding comp growth and never had negative numbers. And all of a sudden, even in our planning, we might have thought about, well, what if we dropped 2%? And we dropped 5.7% in like 1 month. And people did not know what to do. Navigating that window of time and leaning into things that I'd learned about change in the past, and how do you bring people along, and how do you find in the midst of things that feel completely uncontrollable, how do you hold on to the things that you can, and how do you hold on to each other? Bringing people and building confidence and giving them something that they can do certainly offsets the pain of not knowing, but it's a lot of pain. And then for me, through that time, my mother had Alzheimer's, and the last 9 months I was serving at Borders, we had in-home hospice. So it was that time of care. I mean, she did not leave the bed for 9 months. So I learned everything about caring for her while all this is going on in the world. And I'm always thankful that during that time, because of the CEO Forum, which was associated with Focus on the Family at the time, I was going through experiencing God in the midst of all of that. And it was like this sweet lifeline during that time. But you learn so much in that. And then from there, it was going into Christian publishing. And I thought, oh, now I'm in Christian publishing. People are always going to buy books. But then what happens? Then we start reading our books on our phones. So it's this ongoing series of disruption. And even when I think of the toughest time at CLA, so we create conferences. I mean, we bring people together. And I sat in this chair on March 12th thinking that we were going to have our spring conference, and then the governor shut down Texas, and we were bankrupt. There was no way out, just the way the model works and the way the cash flows. And in 1 hour, God redeemed and brought the solution to us. And I wasn't saying, I remember sitting here going, I'm not even going to ask why. It's so much bigger than that. But Lord, what do I do with what we've been steward to care for you that strengthens leaders? He showed up in a way that I can take absolutely no credit for. And then after he took care of it here in the United States, then he said, go global. I had no idea how that would even begin. And Matt, I said, you are going to have to send me an email and you're going to have to talk to my computer. I can't even, this is so unknown. This is the adventure of saying yes, even though you don't know what's required. And sure enough, I had that one call and that one email. And within 30 days, we had 10 global partners. And we took everything that we did online for the U.S. contingency to leaders. And at that time, it was in 43 different countries, which was amazing that we got that kind of reach in such a short time. So all of those things they build up. And what I would say is everyone strengthens your confidence in God's faithfulness. And so it doesn't so when you're at it again, you're like, all right, Lord, it's another adventure. And in that adventure, I'm going to see the thrill of you doing what only you can do. And I feel like I get to do that really every day.
I don't remember the name of the comedian, but I remember that he took a little time off because he and his wife were having their fourth child. And I remember the show that he did after that season of having that fourth child. He says, you know what having a fourth child is like? He says, it's like having 3 kids and you're drowning in the water and then somebody throws you a baby. And
that's so good. That's so good.
That's exactly. And so that's why my wife and I, we stopped at 3. We're not having that fourth one, but because we felt that at 3, but it does feel like that ministry and life, we have these seasons where it's, how am I going to work through this? And if you have enough semblance of mind at the time, you'll say, well, God, somehow you're going to do it. But that doesn't always make it easier. You just know that the outcome is going to be to his glory. But getting from where you're at today to where he wants you to go sometimes it feels like a tightrope, and you have to get through it. In all of sometimes, like we were talking about mergers and acquisitions, and COVID was this uprising for everybody. How do you go through that and all of those transitions and still kind of hold on and say, all right, even not just to get through personally, but when you're leading and everybody else is looking to you to try to figure out how are we going to do this and hoping that you have the right answers, how do you lead through those times of transition and turmoil and tribulation?
I think there's an invitation, especially in Christian ministry, or there's an invitation to come together, not just as one person, but as a team and an organization, to submit it all to God, like seeking God together. Last year, we had completed 7 cycles of 7 years. So we were kind of in our year of Jubilee.
Yeah.
It started in 2025, and the theme of the conference was Seek First. And conference themes aren't just kind of clever conference things. I mean, we try to live it out. We try to experience what God is. And I just spend so much time thinking, if you seek me, you will find me when you seek me with your whole heart. And understanding whole heart, like not just doing it, not okay, this is my quiet time, but what is that posture of seeking? And there's so much peace and revelation. And I would say that was a highly transformational year. And now we're in the year of multiply. But it's not really, go out and just multiply everything. It's really a continuation of seeking God. And then scripture, Jesus saying, will you be hearers and doers of the word as these seeds of truth are cast on you? And if you do, you will multiply. But it's he that he brings that multiplication in you. I feel like there's been this continued journey, but there is such peace. I recently had a pretty dramatic health issue, devastatingly so. But I watched God orchestrate every moment of that. And now I'm in a place where recovery is miraculous, that it would come at this moment in time. And I'm marveling at that. And I'm like, all right, Lord, this is a lot to process. But during that time, when I got this news, I had no fear. In fact, I had someone that really God sent as an angel to me to care for me in that moment. And she said, how are you doing? I said, I guess this is part of the journey. We're just going to go on a journey. Let's go and find out what God's going to do with this. And even in the time when it was most difficult, I just thought, somehow you'll be glorified in it. And during that, what I would call my greatest physical suffering, it was also a moment of great glory because everyone that I encountered needed Jesus.
Mm.
And I don't know that I've ever had that many opportunities in just 1 week of a time to do that. And they were the kind of opportunities that you don't build through relationship. They're like listening and in the moment. So there is this. So as each one comes, you get to the point where you can say, I am fully convinced that he is who he says he is. And so as we talk about transitioning and moving, which I know is really at the heart of what you're talking about, it's being in that place that says, well, here I am today and I'm giving my best in today. And if tomorrow comes, I don't fear tomorrow. And I don't put my identity in the things I do, if that makes sense. So I love Christian Leadership Alliance, wholeheartedly love it and feel like I was in boot camp all my life to get to do this. But it's not my platform. It's not Tami Heim. It's Christian Leadership Alliance. And I get to be in on it. But when that chapter, that season ends, I will be full of anticipation about what God has next. And it might look completely different, but that's okay. Again, we're back to the adventure. All right, what comes next? Versus, what am I going to do? I'm really uptight. How do we do this? Now, I want to finish strong. I want to transition strong. And I'm working to that end. And there's things that I feel like are important in order to do that. And I pray about them and I ask God to guide. But it's his timing ultimately, right? Always is.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful that I've always been in a position that I could transition well.
Yeah. I'm going to get something because you brought something up, and it's actually on the other side of my office here.
You're allowed to do that. Yes.
I am. I can do that, right? So here we go. Because my entire studio, everything is in transition for my office as well. But and if you're just listening to the podcast, you're going to have to watch it on YouTube. But we realized very early on that none of us, nor would anybody else, ever wear a hat or a T-shirt that said ministry transitions. Right? Can you imagine everybody going to a CLA conference and, your pastoral team, your business administrators, they come back and they're wearing a shirt that says ministry transitions. All of a sudden, everybody thinks that they've just lost their job. And so we thought, well, our mission really is to multiply, especially in the places where they've been divided. And so we came up with this. This is the extent, by the way, of my graphic arts ability right here. But it's just, this is a hat, and it says, X not divide, or multiply not divide. I've had people like at Home Depot who say, what's with the math problem on my head? But this has just been a fun and clever way for us to be able to talk about it. And I've told people at Home Depot, I said, you know how our world feels really divided right now? And what does it take for us to come together? Guess what? Sometimes the church has the same problem. Sometimes Christians who are called to be living together in community, we're struggling in the same way. I'm just curious, from your purview, and you get a big picture view of the nonprofit Christian world. What are the things that are threatening to divide us, and how are you hoping that this upcoming conference will help us to change what that looks like?
First, we're all sinners saved by grace. We are every day. That's how I know who I am, but I know whose I am, right? And that God is sovereign in all of it. And we're each in different parts of the journey or whatever. And we may have different things that, keep us up at night, or things that we fear. So I think when I think about the leaders within Christian Leadership Alliance, the greatest ache is if something happens that I'm not able to address what I know I'm being called to address. So if something radical happens with funding, and I know that I'm going to have to walk away from something, that is a huge pain point. Now, it's all in God's hands, and God sees all of that. And God may have another purpose for something. Like, I know it was really difficult, some of the ministries that lost significant funding, just because they were in a situation where they were receiving funding, there were other things going on that shouldn't have been going on. And I keep thinking, Lord, well, were you shining a light that we needed to see? But this work is still worthy. And maybe this is a clarion call for the church to step up and be more of the church, to complete your work. Maybe it was a bigger test for all of us than just an individual ministry. And so I think that's what people wrestle with. It's like, well, what if we can't care for all those children? I remember how difficult it was for Compassion to have to leave India. Heartbreaking. I know how I felt when we had been to Haiti like 50 times since the earthquake through 2016, and ended up even adopting a child from there. Hard, really refining. And how hard it is not to be able to go back there and do. And yeah, you could financially support things, but there's something about being there and the relationships you form, and you do that. And I think it's like, how are we going to get it done? I even remember after COVID hit and we were doing things online, nobody knew what was going on. I felt like I had a front row seat as how is the church thriving in the midst of absolute unknown? And they were feeling that. It's like, well, how do we get out? We have to go take care of this. We need to take care of these people. What are we going to do? And it was feeling so deeply called to something, and all of a sudden having barriers that would prevent you to do what you needed to be done. Jimmy Mott always talks about the holy discontent of a situation, like that we have it, like it's a holy quest to want to go over and to alleviate pain and care for a need, and then bring the hope of Jesus Christ. So I think that's the ache we feel. It's like, can we got to continue to do this, do the good work.
We're excited to be a part of the Outcomes Conference that's taking place next month, depending on when you're listening to it, but April of 2026, and I'll be gathering there in Dallas. Who's the person that needs to come, and what's the transformation that they'll get on the other side?
Well, as I mentioned, we resemble 1 Corinthians 12, 4-7, is that there's such a variety of people there. And I think there's some conferences you go to and like everybody's a pastor or everybody's in this line of ministry. And I love those because then they're sharing best practices and developing things that can strengthen that kind of ministry. But here, you aren't subject to groupthink. I mean, you could be in a workshop with a variety of people and you're struggling in something and someone says, "Oh, we figured that out." Well, tell me how. Or we haven't figured it out either. And then all of a sudden you're brainstorming with someone who has a different kind of perspective on it. So it's definitely, I would say the majority of the people there are going to be nonprofit Christian nonprofit professionals, but we'll have the church well represented. In fact, we're having the Movement Ready Church Summit being hosted by Vic Green and Replicate Ministries. So churches that get involved, especially churches that want administrative support and want to learn how to do things administratively better for the church. It's not going to be like a lot of pastors sharing. But it's going to be, how do I practically do things? It's perfect for them. And then Christian educators. Christian educators spend a lot of time in that academic space, but they have something to learn and they have something to give when it's the rubber's meeting the road and things are changing. And what is it that I need to know now? And how does that transfer to my students? But I would say it's not like your traditional kind of networking. It's more like being in spaces and exchanging ideas. That's where it happens. That's where the ideas come out. That's where collaboration begins. That's the, oh, what? You? Me too moments that are there. So we say there's 4 promises. You're going to get great professional development. You can get all of your credits for SHRM and CPE. And all those things are happening. So you're going to learn a lot. And then you're going to learn personal training to be more like Christ. That's a promise. And then this collaborative network, like meeting people. In fact, last year, I ran downstairs and I actually had my big oversized sweatshirt and my jammy bottoms because I was going to go downstairs and pick up something that I needed for the next day. And there were all of these young leaders. They were from Reaching Souls. And I'm like, what are they doing? And I went over there, of course, I'm almost ready for bed. And I was listening. I said, well, what have you liked? And they basically spoke of these things. They said, gosh, I'm learning so much. And then another one said, I can't believe I found all these people that do what I do. And I love them and I'm going to get to know them. And then others said, I can't believe how much I'm learning, how I need more of Jesus and I need to be more like him. And people saying, I have never experienced this. This one young leader, she said, I don't think I've ever seen a room with 1,100 people fall on their knees spontaneously in worship to God, not even in my church. So that encouragement is so important, that inspiration, cheering each other on. Those 4 things pretty much permeate those 3 days. And it's the Spirit of God working. I always say, here's my minute by minute by book, and then God has a plan.
Right.
And we intentionally make that space for that to happen. And that's the transformational part. It's like when education, good content, experiential learning, and community come together, everything changes. That's where the transformation takes place.
It's a unique group, and the offerings and the breakouts and the sessions, it's unlike anything I've seen in the Christian community. It's not your normal, it's not a worship conference, but there's worship, right? It's not a business conference, but there is the business of the church, right? Like there's just so many. Yeah, I was captivated by listening to a lawyer speak last year, and it was phenomenal. So Yeah, we're
But
very
that's such
excited.
good stewardship. That's stewardship. You have
Yeah.
to know. I mean, if we want
Yeah.
to steward what God gives us and we want to do it, we want to be above reproach. We need to understand how to do that. So all of that matters. And I praise God that there are people coming that specialize in those areas and they can help each other understand it better.
Yeah. Are you, by the way, are you the extrovert? Like this is like the family reunion and you just thrive off of this for the next few months? Or do you need to take a deep breath at the end of it and say, I need to get in
Well,
a dark, quiet place?
here's the true confession. And I think I've just learned. I've learned how to be more extroverted. But how I manage through it with the conference is if I see you, Matt, I'm not looking around and seeing who else is next. It's you and me.
Mm.
And we can go deep. I would rather stand and have a 15 to 30-minute deep, meaningful conversation with you than make sure that I touch everybody. But yet I know that there are moments in there where it's appropriate to go over and just, like I love the CEO forum. I try to go around and like just greet each one of them and just acknowledge and grateful that they're here. But it is not uncommon for a couple of nights that week for me to literally go to my room, pass out on the bed, and wake up in the morning in exactly what I had on yesterday.
Yep.
And trying to start again because it is a release, a lot of energy. I mean, to be there. But I love it. It's just this front row seat that is very difficult to explain. And I like being on the team that's making the wallpaper pretty so the chandeliers that are there can shine.
I love it. Well, Tami, number one, thank you for sharing your story, your wisdom, your expertise, what God has done in you and through you in all of these things. I love also just that willingness to sit and to look at people because I go to so many conferences and you feel like everybody's looking past you. And so it's hard to be able to have those moments where you can actually connect. So thank you for your leadership with all of that. If people are interested and they want to come, it's not too late. How do they sign up? Where do they go?
You would just go to www.outcomesconference.org and you'll find everything that you need on that page. There's pages on there that you can learn about. You can see all of the programming. You could pick your classes today and figure out where you want to go. If you're earning credits, you can find out how I can earn my continuing education credits. You can learn about our speakers that are going to be gracing the main stage, the exhibitors and the sponsors and the people that are going to be there. And I feel like that's a whole learning experience, Matt. I think I love the exhibit hall because people that are in those spaces see across many. They understand. And I think they are like men and women of Issachar. I mean, they're seeing the times and they're watching the trends. And then they dedicate their lives to creating solutions and products and things that will help accelerate what a ministry is trying to accomplish. So that's, I mean, my favorite thing is to sneak in there early so I can go around and say hey to every one of them because I'm so happy that they're there. And I don't want to keep them from their business once the doors open and others are in there. But I love those people. I love that commitment to advancing ministries.
Well, we will be there. So if you're listening, not only come, but come see us. We have a booth somewhere in the midst of that. I don't know where we're at, but we're in the exhibit hall. We're going to be talking about 9 essential questions that every governing board should be asking. What are,
so good.
When it comes to transitions and succession planning, what's the road for the organization? What's the road for the individual? And how do we do this better? So those are just a couple of the fun things that we have going with ministry transitions. But I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for the effort and looking forward to seeing you in Dallas. Don't even have to leave the airport to get there.
I know. And I love that. I'm so looking forward to that, Matt. I truly am. I love and value your ministry and what you're doing and the difference it makes for strong finishes and great new beginnings.
Thank you, Tami. Appreciate it. One of the things you just heard in this conversation with Tami is that leadership was never meant to be carried alone. And that's part of the heart behind the CLA Outcomes Conference that's happening this April in Dallas, Texas. It's a place where ministry and nonprofit leaders step out of the pressure of leading by themselves and get to step into a community that sharpens and encourages and strengthens one another. If you're leading a ministry, serving on a board, or responsible for stewarding a mission, this gathering was built with you in mind. So you can learn more and register at outcomesconference.org. And if you're there, we'd love to meet you. This is the Life After Ministry podcast.